101.2 FM in Whitstable, Margate and Canterbury.
And across West Kent on 96.7 FM. This is BBC Radio Kent.
Good morning, I'm Jules, it's 9:23. So I promised you somebody who believes that Theresa May should carry on with the job. I was about to say believes that Theresa May is doing a good job, but it doesn't say that on my screen. Let's ask Peter Cook in Gillingham. Hi Peter, how are you this morning?
I'm fine, and you?
Yeah, chickadee-boo. Do you think she's doing a good job?
I didn't think she was doing... I think she's doing the best job she can, given the number of people that are trying to stab her in the back. So I think the thing is, we've got 109 days till we potentially leave the EU. Changing leadership at this point will fritter away another couple of months. It's not even feasible for her to do this. And the people that are on your runners and riders list on Twitter, frankly, have all got self-interest at heart. So we need someone who actually can do something for the country. She is the best person of a bad mix of people, including all the other sort of runners and riders in the other parties, I would say.
It's a pretty dispiriting place to be, though, isn't it, Peter, to have to say out loud on BBC Radio Kent, I think our Prime Minister should stay because she's the least worst of a bad bunch.
I've written her a letter, actually, Julia.
Don't read me the whole thing, but what's the gist of it?
Oh, I can read the whole thing.
No, I don't want you to read the whole thing. Just give me the gist of it.
Well, it's 7 words.
Oh, okay.
Dear Mr. Barnier, let's stay together, Theresa May. Regarding Article 50. She is a Remainer. She should actually now say that we've had 2.5 years.
Yeah.
We've let the Brexiteers have their go. Boris, all of the men have left the stage. I don't want to get into a women debate, but she actually is stoicism and she stayed there. And they've all run away. They've had their go at trying to leave. She should now, I was going to say man up, but woman up, and say let's remain.
You're obviously a Remainer to come to that conclusion.
I was mixed about it, but undoubtedly they have had 2.5 years. I run a business. If I had 2.5 years to propose to a client something and I hadn't got a proposal together, the client would rightly send me down the road.
But what I don't understand about your position, Peter, is you are blaming the Brexiteers for her failure to get a better deal. Now, that strikes me as a slightly twisted position to take because she kept them out of the loop. From what I've heard from inside sources, she was telling different people in the cabinet the bits they wanted to hear, but never telling them all of it. And she has kept the negotiating cards close to her chest. How can you possibly blame the likes of Boris Johnson and Dominic Raab and Esther McVeigh for her failure to get a deal that really looks like Brexit? It's her own failure, isn't it? Not theirs.
Taking the internal view, I think she's kept everyone out of the loop. That's a particular feature of her leadership style.
But in which case you're slightly endorsing my argument that you can't really blame the Brexiteers for her failure to get their deal. It wasn't their deal. It was...
No, well, I think we can actually conclude after this length of time that Brexit is rather like a Rubik's Cube that you cannot solve. Your previous caller was testament to that he wants cake and eat it too. Complicated. It is incredibly complicated.
But it wouldn't be complicated if we had gone for a very hard Brexit, wouldn't it? That would have been much simpler. We wouldn't have been asking for favours. We would have been saying we are leaving, we're going to pay the bare minimum and we'll look after ourselves, thanks very much. That's what the Leave camp will say, that was a perfectly reasonable position and we could have got there quite quickly.
It wasn't the mandate of the people. If you look at the sort of the vote, which was a marginal gain to leave, it was composed of several segments. There were the people that wanted to stick it to Cameron. They didn't read the question on the exam paper. There were the people who disliked immigration, which your previous caller alluded to. And there were some people who wanted to leave the EU, but they weren't a homogenous group. And it's time to kind of conclude that actually was a fatally flawed attempt by David Cameron to bring the Tory party together. It clearly hasn't worked because people on all sides have been trying to stab her in the back.
But that point is, as many of my listeners will be screaming at the radio right now, is that we should have had a Leaver as Prime Minister as soon as David Cameron stepped down, because they will say Theresa May's never really believed in it. She's got this slightly cack-handed version of it because she didn't want us to leave at all.
She was also mixed. If you would have said what sort of Prime Minister should we have had, it should have been a 52-48 person, whatever that.
What does that look like?
Well, it doesn't. It's a ludicrous concept. Perhaps you should have had a coalition then. She did, however, appoint mainly Brexiteers to the cabinet, and they did all have their go at negotiating. David Davis, in particular, he was a very hard leaver. He eventually left the stage. I'm sorry,
but didn't all these people leave the stage because they couldn't? Because in the end, Theresa May wasn't allowing them free rein for that sort of Brexit. That she had these various Brexit secretaries, none of whom was really allowed to do the job because in the end she wanted to do it herself.
I think David Davis had a very good go of putting stuff out in public that he wanted to do. Whatever happened in the background, which of course is the really interesting arena, which we're not privy to, he bypassed that by putting statements in the press about they need us more than we need them and all the other things. He may well have been. The trouble is they've all stabbed each other in the back, and there we have this particular mess. And this week I'm releasing a song called Theresa May's a Remainer. Maybe we should restrain her. It's a country and western classic. And I think it points out that we are in a complete mess. And I'm sitting on the fence here thinking, rather than headlong run into further into a mess, we should actually take a bold decision and realise that the referendum was just the second referendum, because we had one in 1975. We should now take stock of it.
When you say we should take stock of it, do you mean we should have another one and say, well, this is the informed one? Before you didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't know what we were doing. Now we've got the deal in front of us, that we should have another referendum. What do you think? Or do you want to take advantage of the ECJ ruling this morning that we can just revoke Article 50 and say, do you know, it was all a bad dream, but we're like Bobby Ewing, we'll step out of the shower and pretend the last 2.5 years didn't happen?
You're drifting into my country and western tragedy here. Well, actually, yes, we should. Point number one, if Article 50 can be revoked, and if the will of the people has changed, which it has by many, many polls, then there should be an opportunity to revoke Article 50, which would give her more breathing time. I don't want a people's vote particularly. I think it's a backstop, like the Northern Ireland Pact backstop. We showed during the referendum that it was an extremely divisive campaign fuelled by lies on both sides, perhaps the bigger ones, the £350 million on the bus and the use of the sort of divisive posters about immigration were on the Leave side, but there were lies all round. We have actually demonstrated that referenda in this country we're not sufficiently informed, or perhaps we're over-informed. We're rained on by information, and people were genuinely confused.
But let me burst your bubble with the notion of civil unrest. I genuinely would I would be frightened of what would happen if the government just said, do you know what, let's just let's just rein back on the whole thing. It was only advisory, and actually we think people have changed their minds, and actually the ECJ says we can back off on the whole thing. So just nothing to see here, everyone. Let's pretend Brexit never existed. There would be uproar if that happened.
I fundamentally challenge that. I myself was punched by 7 Brexiteers 6 weeks ago. I had 2 black eyes.
You were punched by 7 Brexiteers. This sounds like something from a country and western as well. What do you mean you were punched by 7 Brexiteers?
I was punched on the train by 7 people who objected to a T-shirt I had, which said simply "Break Brexit before Brexit breaks Britain."
So just tell me what happened. You were sitting there minding your own business in your T-shirt, and what you were set upon.
They were looking for trouble as well. I would say it's 50-50 down to me for having the T-shirt, and 50-50 down to them for looking for trouble. The Kent police did investigate. All right.
Well, if it's a live police case, we'll probably best steer away from the details of what happened next. But what's your point about that and there being an unlikelihood of uproar?
My point is that we have a divided country.
Yeah.
The difference between the civil unrest that you talk about and so we either have decide to leave, and we probably have a weekend of water cannon. We don't do water cannon since Boris sold the machine, but there were 3,000 people showed up on Sunday to campaign for Leave Means Leave. There were 700,000 people showed up to Remain. As an expression of democracy, I would think that you may well find some unpleasant elements on the street. but it would be rather limited. I think people have over-egged the pudding, and people are in fear of this. We can't be guided by a few hundred people who are going to punch people. I particularly have been punched. I live to tell the tale, and I'm not going to be cowed by that.
Peter, thank you for your call. Peter Cook in Gillingham. I don't know why we've suddenly got his surname and everyone else has just got a first name. I've just noticed that. Peter in Gillingham. Punched over his T-shirt, he says, but doesn't think there would be uproar if Brexit was cancelled. What do you think? 0800 756 1111. Paul is our next caller, and Paul is in Sittingbourne. What did you make of that? Just the last bit before we go on to your points, Paul. Our last caller, Peter, saying it could be cancelled. It's a sensible thing to do, and there might be a weekend of bother, and then everyone would get over it.
I don't think it should be cancelled. I voted to stay, but I think the decision was made, and we should stick to the decision that was made when we had the vote.
And do you think it was an informed consent at the time? Do you think people knew? I mean, if I'm honest, if I may speak frankly for a moment, I didn't know the deal we were going to get. I didn't know what this was, and I might have voted differently if somebody said, okay, this is how we'll leave. Do you want to leave or not? I might have voted differently. Do you think you were informed? And in a sense, how could we have been? Because nobody knew what the deal was going to be.
No, we weren't informed. We were just given a basic question, do we stay or do we leave? Nobody knew, any of the politicians included, what would the outcome would be.
Doesn't that make you look back and think that the whole thing was a bit daft?
Yes, if you look at it that way, yes, it was a stupid idea to have the vote in the first place. I think it should have been explained by the politicians far more better than what it was, than just say, well, are we staying or are we going?
So if it was a stupid idea, I'm just following your logic, if it was a stupid idea, given the limited information or the accuracy and no idea of what the deal would finally be, do you think we should stick with it or not?
I think now we have a deal. Well, we still don't know all the ins and outs of the deal. We've got some basics. But I think we should stick with the deal that Theresa May has managed to get. All right, it's not perfect. It won't suit everybody. There will be those for and against. But I think the politicians now should stop all the backstabbing and throwing toys at the prams and back her. She did the best she believes she could do. And as far as I'm concerned, although I voted to stay, we should back Mrs May.
Do you think that because it actually is quite a Remainy version of Brexit, if you'll excuse my appalling grammar? It's not hard Brexit by any means, is it?
No, it isn't a hard Brexit at all. Do I think? No, I think she, although she is a Remainer like myself and many other people, I think she's done what she believes is the best that she could do for this country. And but
even her own MPs don't seem to agree with that. I mean, it looks like she's heading for a massive defeat tomorrow.
Yes, it does. And I think her MPs should be ashamed of themselves because you can't put somebody in charge of a party, back her so far, and then because they don't like what the deal that she's come up with, turn around and stab her in the back and then desert her at the vital point when the vote is taken.